Part-time assistant coordinator for STAR. I used to be the coordinator, but I was still part-time. But about a year ago, we were able to hire a full-time person to do that job, which is David Green, who will be doing the second half of the presentation. So I'm really happy that David's involved with us. We really do appreciate this opportunity by the Illinois Stewardship Alliance and the related groups to be a part of this Soil Health Week. The session we will provide today will include an overview of STAR, but we'll also explain a little more about how it can be used by those interested in soil health, as well as soil and water conservation. So this works. All right. Okay. So STAR is short for Saving Tomorrow's Agriculture Resources. It's a free tool that is simple, but we think it's really important that it's farmer-led. I'll talk more about that later. It started because of the concerns, especially for the agriculture resources in Champaign County. And we believe that the practices used on fields is a great way for us to identify the problems that exist and perhaps how to resolve those issues. From the beginning, it was determined that STAR should not only be simple and therefore more likely to be used, but also free and therefore more likely to be used by farmers. But it also needed to be and continues to be voluntary. So I'm going to talk about, break down, if you will, in an outline form, some other items, particularly the purpose of STAR. It really is to evaluate the practices used on individual fields to determine how well those practices are used to, again, protect the ag resources that exist in a particular geographic location, excuse me. The process then of using those practices is of using points. Obviously, the better the practice for those soil and water conservation issues, the more points are assigned. And then eventually those points are summarized into a STAR rating. So always curious, of course, about when does this really happen? For example, the 2023 crop year yet to be planted, unless it's winter wheat, which was planted, we'll begin with our new form on July 1st, and then that'll run through January 31st of next winter. The immediate goal of STAR, as established at least in Champaign County, is to reduce nutrient and soil losses and improve soil health. And ultimately, our vision is that we believe STAR can be a tool used to reduce nutrient and soil losses and improve soil health over a larger area, perhaps the entire Mississippi River watershed. So why, back up. Why do we exist, if you will? STAR was developed as a reaction to, and I've got a typo here, really was developed in 2017, but the nutrient loss reduction strategy that was established in 2015 through a combination of the Illinois EPA and the Illinois Department of Agriculture became very much a standard for many people to start looking at what are we doing as farmers and landowners throughout the Mississippi watershed. So as I already said, it was created in Champaign County by the Soil and Water Conservation District. But it's important to know that it was also directly the result of the two farmers that are pictured here, Steve Stierwalt, Joe Rothermel, who were and continue to be leadership within our conservation district. Ultimately, as word spread about what we were doing in Champaign County, other counties and districts became aware of what we were doing and asked if they could, in fact, use STAR. I've made a statement before, and I'll continue to use it, that there wasn't a particular plan when it was being developed that we wanted to see this thing spread and become a full-time job or a part-time job for anybody. It was because of what the district really wanted to see done better. So as the presentation, if you will, to the district actually happened to the board by the stewardship committee. We actually had a stewardship committee who presented it to the board. They approved it. And so officially, STAR began in April of 2017. But as I said, it's also spread beyond our county, and in fact has now spread into other states that we call state affiliates: Iowa, Missouri, and Colorado. I'll talk more about that a little later. One of the things that we know has been important to many farmers and landowners, but particularly farmers, is their privacy of their data. And so we have continued from the beginning to assure farmers that as we gather this information, that it is completely held within our own group, and nothing is ever shared, not only about the results, but even about any of the other contact information, for example. And we've had people request, they wanted a list of the farmers using STAR. Absolutely never. I'll talk perhaps about this later, but a great place to get more information is our website that you see, starfreetool.com. So how does it really happen? What's the function, if you will, in terms of how do we get people involved with using STAR? There's three ways. The one that we will talk a little bit more in a few minutes about is the STAR web app. Very important. It's been very helpful now to some people. Old guys like me necessarily don't particularly jump at a chance to use another app, but a lot of people do. The second method is the more traditional, if you will, and where we originally started was with a field form. Again, I'll talk about that a little bit more in a few minutes. And the third method, most of you would not know about necessarily, but has to do with precision conservation management and their portal. At the end of each crop year, the data from all three methods then is aggregated into a single set of results that we can share through our annual report. And by the way, all participants are eligible to receive a free field sign. We believe this is really important. Not every participant wants to do that. They don't necessarily. I've had farmers just tell me, I don't like putting up field signs. So, okay, that's a good enough reason not to do it. But we found it's very helpful. Some great stories come out of that, like the neighbor who came in, or the farmer who came in to see me a couple years ago and said, well, my neighbor put up his 3-star field signs, and I want to put up my 4-star field signs to show him up a little bit. It was nice. It was good. It worked. Another person who told me that he had a non-farm neighbor, somebody lived in the country, came up to him and after seeing his sign and wanted to know, well, what's that sign all about? And so the farmer had a real chance to talk to him, explain to the neighbor of how he's trying to do things better to protect the soil and the neighbor and himself. So I'm going to start by talking about a little more detail about the PDF field form itself, which the vast majority of people who use that use the electronic version, use the computer, fill it in, makes it very easy. One of the advantages has to do with once you've done one of your cornfields, there's a good chance that almost everything in terms of the practices that would be checked off on this sheet probably would be true for most of your cornfields. So it makes that process of doing additional fields very easy. And again, it's just to check off the items. We tell people once they get a little familiar with the form, it only takes about 5 minutes to fill out the form. But again, remember, it's done for each individual field. One of the things that we talked about with the web app, I'll come back to that in a minute, has some other advantages as well. But one of the things that we make sure and mention is that near the top of the basic information, there's a place where the person who wants to participate must sign the form. And that is because we do have a random selection of all our fields that participate so that we can do verification. We'll talk more about that in a few minutes. So as we talk about what the form asks for and so on, obviously I've alluded to the fact that there's scoring that has to be done. And so the first question that many people want to know is, well, who decided what practices are being promoted and who decides how many points should in fact be used for that? Well, we have a science advisory committee. That group is made up of a number of a few farmers, a number of research people, extension people, and also some people who we would call conservation professionals from other groups. They've done a great job and as volunteers to help us with that whole process. The actual scoring itself then is done by licensed counties, I alluded to already, or in some cases, if the field form has been submitted from a county, from a farmer in a county that's not licensed, then we and the STAR staff, David, myself, and others are able to do that for them. The score sheet itself is just a simple spreadsheet, so it's fairly easy to do. We use a lot of drop-down boxes. We'll talk about that in the next slide. And then as the items are marked on that spreadsheet, obviously the points are totaled. And the entire process of actually doing the scoring itself also takes about 5 minutes for a field. So it's pretty simple, pretty easy. As you look at this slide, it's an example of a section from a field form as well as the scoring sheet section that matches up with that. A couple of things you'll notice about that, if you wanted to bother to look at some of the details, is that the points vary, as I alluded to earlier, based on the practice. So for example, a grass waterway, you can get 2 points for having a grass waterway on that particular field. Whereas if you have a windbreak on the edge of that field, that's only worth 1 point. And again, the points vary quite a bit. Perhaps a better example of what I would want to talk about would be tillage. If you have a field for which there is no tillage done at all, let's say it's a cornfield, no tillage was done in the fall, then that field earns 5 points. Whereas if you did deep tillage in the fall, there would be 0 points. So of course, the points would add up fairly quickly. The other one I would mention would be cover crops. Obviously, we want to see more cover crops done, not only for soil and nutrient loss reduction, but also for soil health. That's a significant place to earn points. In fact, you could earn just by having a winter hardy cover crop, that's 7 points. So pretty significant. And again, this spreadsheet automatically calculates not just the total points, but also, as you can see here, the star rating that's involved. One of the important parts about that whole process, however, is that once we have the scoring done, the participant, the farmer or landowner, will be given copies of the field form that they should probably already have anyway, but we make sure they have a copy of their original field form and the matching score sheets. We know that's necessary as we want to see people not just get a measurement of what they're doing through STAR, but also what can they do differently. And by looking at the points, they might say, for example, that, oh, so if I had gone to no tillage in the fall and waited and just done my tillage in the spring, I could earn 5 points. And I just missed being a 3-star field. So maybe I would have had a 3-star field had I done that differently. Those are the things we're trying to get the participants to think about and do. This slide shows simply some of the major points, if you will, identified by, again, practices that we have. And as you see here, what we wanted to encourage people to consider is using a suite of practices rather than just simply identifying, for example, that, oh, if I just do no tillage, that's going to give me this many points. Well, that's fine. But the reality is the ultimate star rating is going to be dependent on a suite of practice. What different things can be done? So, for example, you might be able to get to a 3-star field with doing traditional tillage if you've done other types of practices that would, again, be fitting and recommended, if you will, to reduce soil and nutrient losses. There are, by the way, a couple of practices that actually are negative points. So, for example, putting on fertilizer on frozen ground, that's one with all our science people get all over that. And that's -6 points. So something we want to see people do less of or not at all. So let's talk about the web application for a couple of minutes. It debuted in June of 2021. So we really only have had the two years, of that. And very simply, with the advantage of that, it's clear and obvious that if you have a web app, then you can use your smartphone or the tablet or computer still work. And that works really well. One of the major advantages, of course, is that it provides immediate scoring and the star ratings themselves for the participant. One of the best parts about it, I think, is not just that that's done automatically, but also that it will give you the ability to ask for it. You just click a button and it'll tell you an improvement plan. Here are some of the things that you could have done. What practices might you have done instead of as alternatives to what you did originally and what you indicated in your submissions? And that will tell you, okay, if you had done this type of practice, then you would have gotten this star rating. And that can be significant as we, again, are trying to get people to think about making changes in what they do. It also has a place on that web app that you can check that simply says, I would like some help. I would like some advice. Then that is an automatic signal, if you will, to the local soil and water conservation district, resource conservationist, or whomever is in that office that says, Mrs. Smith would like to get some advice on how to improve the star rating on her field or fields. It also is a place with another click where you can indicate that you want a field sign or field signs, which again, as I said earlier, we really think it's an important part of what we're trying to ultimately do as we communicate to neighbors and others who aren't involved with agriculture. I alluded to precision conservation management. I want to explain a little bit more. If you're not familiar with that, it is a voluntary organization founded by and sponsored by the Illinois Corn Growers Association. They started about the same time that STAR did, also as a response to the NLRS and the concerns by that organization about how can we get farmers to do more things that reduce those nutrient soil losses so that we might see better numbers and protect not just the Gulf, but all of the rivers shed and so on between here and there. One of the things that we've seen with the PCM organization is that they came alongside of us and we came alongside of them to work together so that a farmer who is involved with PCM can simply ask their specialist, that's the person they would work with, hey, I would also like my star ratings. And they can push a button because we have this API, application programming interface, as a part of that. So they're able to get the notice immediately of what their star ratings are. And of course, they tend to work with their specialists about looking at things that they can do and change differently. One of the things why I think it's important for PCM and for our involvement with them is because one of their major goals is not just about reducing soil losses and nutrient losses, but it's also about showing farmers and landowners that there are economic reasons for making those decisions, making those changes. So we're pretty excited about how that's going to continue to help all of us as we try to improve, again, the conservation that's being used. All right. David's going to take over at this point.
Yep. Thank you, Bruce. Okay. As mentioned earlier, and let me know if I'm speaking too loudly or too softly or if I'm cut off. My internet connection's a little unstable at the moment. As mentioned earlier, STAR has grown, even though there initially was not a plan or intent to use it beyond Champaign County. But since then, we've gotten a lot more popular. Other soil and water conservation districts that want to use STAR are required to complete a license agreement, but there is no fee or charges for being licensed. One of the reasons that STAR continues to use soil and water districts as a method to deliver the program is because we need to have technical assistance available to participants at the local county level. We believe that that is the critical step for STAR to be used as a tool to help farmers and landowners know what changes need to be made. Let's see, STAR expansion into other states has happened similarly to the expansion to other counties with no particular intent to do so. The conservation districts of Iowa was the first to sign a memorandum of understanding, or MOU for short, to start using STAR. They did a pilot project in 2021 and are continuing to use it. The state of Missouri soon followed, but they are still working on and applying it to their needs, and recently received a grant that will help them get started. The Colorado Department of Agriculture signed an MOU about 2 years ago. They were already seeking a program that would help them with their soil health goals, and they determined that STAR could really help them. They initially developed 12 evaluation tools for their wide diversity of agriculture enterprises. That has provided some great challenges and also great opportunities for STAR. Colorado is using STAR, but they also developed their state-exclusive STAR Plus program that is an alternative program and includes some measurements about soil health itself. We realized several years ago that we needed staff dedicated to supporting STAR to help additional licensees and affiliates as they trickle in. We were able to get some grant funding that allowed us to hire 2 full-time people, including an operations manager and a STAR coordinator. The steering committee that makes all of these major decisions about STAR has made the decision to formalize STAR as a national organization. We are in the process of getting status as a not-for-profit corporation. Colorado was recently named as a recipient of a USDA Climate Smart grant that will include some funding for our National STAR program. That will allow us to hire 2 more people that will work directly on operating and expanding STAR at the national level. We learned in our first year that businesses and other partner groups expect programs such as STAR to have a method of verifying the information that was being submitted for STAR ratings. To provide that credibility, we randomly select about 10% of all the fields that are part of our crop year enrollment period. Recall that all participants are told upfront that verification might be necessary for their fields. Volunteers are provided with the basic information for these fields, and they contact the participant. They complete this form and submit it to the STAR staff along with the documents needed. We have partners in both the public and private sectors. The Illinois Department of Agriculture directors have each submitted supportive letters for STAR since its inception in 2017. But the support by IDOA has become even more significant as of 2 years ago. The Partners for Conservation program now requires that a STAR field form must be submitted for any field that is requesting cost shares by IDOA. Please keep in mind that STAR itself is a completely voluntary program. Only IDOA participants are mandated to use the STAR field forms for their cost shares, but for anyone else, it's completely voluntary. In licensed counties, the staff does the scoring just like they do for any other submissions, and in non-licensed counties, the field forms are scored by the STAR staff over in Champaign County. STAR also has many private partners. In addition to private groups like American Farmland Trust and the Nature Conservancy, we also have support from private firms such as ADM. ADM has been seeking a method of sourcing grain from farmers that are trying to use good conservation practices. They started a pay-for-performance program in Macon and Douglas counties that pay participants for showing an improvement in the STAR rating for their fields. As you see in this chart, they would be paid $5 per acre if the field improved from a 1-star rating to a 2-star rating. $10 per acre would be paid for increased from 2 stars to 3 stars, $15 if increased from 3 to 4 stars, and $20 per acre would be paid if the rating went from 4 to 5 stars. In addition, they paid $20 per acre for any field that is rated at 5 stars and are maintained that way for at least 2 years. Retailers can use STAR as a conservation starter, as a conversation starter, no matter what products or services they provide. We are currently working with other retailers that are considering using STAR in a similar approach. Any retailer that is already gathering appropriate information can also use the API method mentioned earlier with PCM that would make it very easy to establish star ratings. Why use star? There are many potential benefits for using star, particularly for farmers and landowners. If star is used as much as we think it should be, and if it is used as we hope, it will help meet our goals of decreasing nutrient and soil losses and improving soil health. As mentioned earlier, STAR is required in Illinois to obtain cost share funds from IDOA. The PCM group will continue to show how the use of conservation practices measured by STAR can increase net income. STAR is a very unique method to show non-farmers how the participants are helping improve the environment, which will help with the image of agriculture. In addition to affecting non-farmers, we know STAR can motivate other farmers to consider using the program. There are many absentee farmland owners who care deeply about the environment and conservation. STAR can be used by these farmers to improve their relationship with their current landlords, and perhaps they can be more competitive in getting additional farms to rent. As described before, we hope to see more farms use the ADM model to provide incentives for using STAR to improve the conservation practices already used on farms. And as for some STAR results from our program, including a few Indiana counties that use the Illinois field form version, for the 2021 crop year, we had 460 unique participants who enrolled 1,400 fields totaling about 83,000 acres. Our preliminary data for the 2022 crop year indicate very similar amounts of participation. Notice that 373 of the fields are using STAR were submitted because of IDOA requirements for cost share. Accounting for all STAR fields in 2021, not just Illinois, we had about just under 1,600 enrolled fields. About 84% of those fields were rated at 3 stars and above, indicating that a vast majority of our STAR fields used a suite of practices that are helping to reduce nutrient and soil losses and improving soil health. Our data summary for that year also indicates some facts about the 5-star fields as followed. 90% of fields were under no-till or strip-till management. 85% planted at least one winter hardy cover crop. 82% applied phosphorus at or below removal rates, and 68% of corn farmers with a 5-star rating did not apply any nitrogen in the fall. And that concludes our main presentation. Now we have time for questions and or comments. And looking at the questions here, Allison asked, is it possible for small-scale market farmers to use this system? Yes. So we've had farmers with hundreds of acres and farmers with less than 1 acre. I saw a couple a few weeks ago where someone had 0.25 acres. So yes, it's possible. You can, any farmer from any state can fill out a STAR evaluation. Let's see. And then the second question is, are there any plans to connect ratings to financial benefits? Yes, we mentioned how we are trying out a pay-for-performance pilot program in Illinois. Macon and Douglas County farmers who fill out a contract with us can get paid for their field practices to get financial payments per acres. We are planning to also expand that program to 2 more counties by the time the 2023 crop year starts. That would be Moultrie counties and Piatt County, which are both in Illinois. Does anyone else have any other questions that we can answer? Do STAR payments conflict with USDA or NRCS programs?
It depends.
Sometimes, yeah, it depends. Go
Sometimes.
ahead, Aaron.
Yeah, STAR, as David and Bruce presented with like the Partners for Conservation program conducted through IDOA, you know, that's state funding. So that's considered a public funding bucket. And so you wouldn't be able to participate in that program and also receive, an EQIP or a CSP contract for the same practices on the same acres. You can enroll in 2 different programs as long as it's not covering, the same practices and same acres. But you can enroll in, say, the PFP program. That's a privately funded program at this time. It's a philanthropic funding bucket that was given to the Nature Conservancy, Kellogg's, and ADM through the Midwest Row Crop Collaborative. So as it stands right now, that's a private funding bucket, and it could be built on to a public funding opportunity. So anything that's, related to getting cover crop payments or nutrient management payments or star rating payments, it just kind of depends on where the funding is coming from. And I know that Helen and Tori are on the line. I'm going to put a plug into them. They had a presentation earlier this week about the Illinois cover crop directory, the program directory. Thanks, Helen. Yep, she shared a link to that. So that kind of paints a picture for all the different programs that are available throughout the state, and if they overlap or not, and if you could qualify for their programs as well as other programs at the same time.
J.A. Ginsburg was asking about how these practices could be valued by banks and insurance companies.
At this point,
To bring that
Okay.
out, the cost of capital is a big deal. And in building trades right now, as they're moving toward net zero, developers who are producing these better buildings are actually getting, basis points off the cost of capital because the loans are better. They survive better, they're easier to trade, they can do this so that you end up with one developer that I talked to, I interviewed in Colorado. The reduced cost of capital zeroes out the extra cost of building green. So you start getting the savings right away.
Wow.
If you have healthy land, it should be able to handle heat and drought and flood better. And over time, you need a profile to show that, but that should be an outcome. And since it requires fewer inputs and is easier to manage, I think that there's a business case to be made here. And one of the things I've been looking for, I think Liz has seen me try hard on a few of these things to find it, is what is the good proxy for the health of the land? And it seems like STAR is a full metric that may serve that purpose. But if you really want this to scale, then it has to be more than $5 or $10 an acre. It has to actually be a business proposition. And my background goes deep into journalism. I was a correspondent for Business Weeks at one point. So I really go for this, make it tasty, make this real.
We would love more input from you anytime. Thank you. If Helen's still on here, one of the things that we're just now working on too is a relationship more with retailers. So in other words, those people who do sell seed, fertilizer, chemical crop protections to farmers. Helen, why don't you speak to that for a moment?
Sure, Bruce, thanks. Yeah, we hear from a lot of farmers that, who their most trusted advisor and the person that they look to when they're thinking about what kind of decisions they're making on the farm, it's their retailer, right? And so at AFT, we're interested in engaging retailers more with the STAR program and thinking about the STAR form serves as such a good, as David said, conversation starter for a farmer, and a conservation planning tool where the farmer can sit down with somebody from their conservation district and walk through step by step. And so we think that there's also opportunity to engage the retailer in that conversation too, and have some of these practices be promoted from the retailer as well. yeah, so we're trying to engage retailers. So if anyone's on the call is a retailer or works with a retailer who'd be interested in learning more, we have a couple listening sessions that we're planning with the goal of potentially launching a pilot program this fall with a few retailers in the state.
Thanks, Helen.
So you mentioned that there are farmers and that there are landowners. And I'm basically seeing that there's probably a Venn diagram where some farmers are landowners. But
Right.
if looking at some recent data is actually true, it's shifting. So there are fewer but bigger landowners. And that's how the pie is breaking up. How do you present what you offer to appeal to landowners versus farmers?
Well, I think similarly with this, conversation starter piece is that's, another thing that we hear a lot is either the landowner and tenant farmer relationship plays a big role in whether these practices are adopted on the land, right? So sometimes there's a disconnect where the farmer wants to try something out and the landowner, that relationship isn't there, and the tenant farmer is maybe nervous to kind of breach that idea, or they're on a one year rental agreement, and so it's harder to think about longer term investments. And then I was on a call this morning where we were talking about kind of from the non-operating landowner perspective of how to engage with your tenant farmer and how to share information about these practices and how to make it appealable, appeal to them to incorporate those practices.
A thought, a suggestion on this that came up in another conversation. The landowners are the ones paying the property taxes, correct?
Right.
Well,
Yes.
there should be a tie-in, and I know the Delta Institute has been working toward this between land values and between the health of the land and the value of the land. And if that could be somehow correlated, and again, I'm really sort of very intrigued by STAR because there needs to be a metric here, and it's just like elusive. Darn carbon, it's not as solid as you think it ought to be. That if it could be tied in, that healthy land gets a tax break, that would be a lever to appeal to a landowner.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's an interesting thread to pull on.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I like that idea of STAR being a metric. And I think as was mentioned in the presentation, thinking about STAR moving to a national scale and thinking about how we can compare things in different cropping systems and in different states. It'll be interesting to see where we go.
I'd really like that idea too, as we interact more and more with Colorado, because as David and his part alluded to, they actually started a soil health program through the Department of Agriculture in Colorado. And when they heard about STAR, they saw how it could fit in really well with a big portion of what they were doing. But they are clearly ahead of us in Illinois, my opinion, in terms of really pushing soil health at the government level, if you will. And so we've got a lot to learn, but I think we can learn some things from them.
It's so important. I mean, and again, it's just because I've covered parallel industries, and what I find, which sort of breaks my heart with climate, is that we've become carbon reductionists. And it's a much more complex problem, and what healthy soil solves is huge. So getting it off this carbon thing and finding metrics that everyone can understand, get their arms around, and then tying that to actual, this is what it means in the market. I was having a back and forth with somebody who was carrying on about how soil carbon measurements are crap, and was basically saying it's a public good to have healthy soil, and I countered, it's a public good on private land. So you have to actually square that circle.
Hmm.
And Liz knows how to find me. So
Good.
Does anyone else have any other questions?
I have a question, actually.
Yes.
I was gonna start typing it, but then it got too long. So I am the ag ecologist with McHenry County Conservation District. So we are a landlord or a landowner that manages a lot of farmland. And I like the idea of using the STAR program as a way of assessing our farmland and the practices that are being utilized on it, which are kind of diverse. So is it possible that I can enter the data that we collect from our tenants into the STAR program to kind of track how our farm health, our field health is, ranking?
Yes.
Okay. I was just wondering because
Well,
yeah,
yeah,
I went
you
to
would
the
be
web
like a
app.
landowner. You're a landowner. You represent a landowner, and we have at least one in Champaign County where it's the landowner, and he's initiating it. And he's working with us operators to determine what practices are being used.
Okay.
But he likes to be involved, and he's the one that gets the field signs and make sure they get put up. So
Perfect. Okay. Well, I just went to the web app and I see that it looks like you can't enter new data until July 1st. Is that?
that's
Yep.
correct.
We are in our interim period right now. So all crop field data totals are done. You have to wait until the next crop year enrollment period starts in July 1st to enter in new data.
When does the data entry period end then?
January 31st. Of the
Okay,
next
that's
year.
good to know because I will admit we have about 60 plus farmers and it can take a long time to get the data that I would need to enter into the program.
Sure.
Mhm.
And
So-
keep in mind that timeline, because sometimes people get a little confused. We have that form available for the 23 crop year in July 1. Well,
Mhm.
all the decisions that would affect those practices have been made by that time for the crop that's being planted. For example, if they planted in the fall of 22, that's really for a 23 crop, like with wheat. Or they did tillage for the 23 crop for fall was just this past fall. Sometimes even farmers get a little confused on our timeline. So,
Okay, got it.
so you could actually start collecting data information earlier.
Mhm. Sure, yeah. Well,
Yep.
thank you.
Yep. And if you have a lot of fields to enter in, then I highly recommend using the web app because not only will you get your field ratings instantly without having a licensee manually score everything and return it back to you with possibly errors here and there because, entering 100 fields at once. So there's occasionally a clerical error. But we're also making improvements to our web application all the time. I know that this year we made the split fields tool so that people can draw more accurate field boundaries for their thing.
Cool, thank you.
Yep. Does anyone else have any other questions?
Could I ask another question real quick about vegetable farmers?
Sure.
So I'm looking at the form from last year, and it seems like a lot of the practices that I'm seeing on there are things that like I've never even heard of before, or that are like pretty irrelevant to my context. Is there a person that I should contact for help understanding like how I might answer some of these things for my context?
Sure. David or myself.
Okay, great.
Yeah, either one of us would be glad to help you with that.
Okay, thank you.
That's great. And by the way, we continue to look at options and things that might be available. It's one of the reasons why I really like our involvement with Colorado, because as I think David mentioned, they've already got 12 different evaluation forms. Well, one of them's for potatoes and one of them's for, I don't know, whatever else, grassland and so on. So we're hoping that we can take advantage of some of the things that they're doing and see how we can apply some of those concepts to what we do in Illinois.
Yeah, I think it would be really cool to see a version of this that was targeted specifically at diversified vegetables or even like a more polyculture cropping system. Because I think that sometimes those of us in this world think that we're doing things that are really ecologically sound, but it would be nice to see some data backing that up, other than just like having a feeling that it's good.
Right, right. No, that'd be great. And you're not the first person who's asked that basic question. So
Okay,
we
awesome.
want to help others. Yes.
Any other questions?
So the information on the screen now, if you didn't get it already, or you can get it by emailing either one of us, but we'd be glad to help you.
Well, looks like no one has any. Let's see. First question from Crystal: would a star system work for a community garden? I think it should. If you have a diverse crop rotation, then there's definitely a let's see, I don't know how to word this. When you pick your crop, you can write down corn, soybean, wheat, hay, forage, or other. In the other category, you could record your crop for your community garden, your primary crop. And then for Russell's question, can we go backwards and enter data for previous years to get a rating? I wouldn't recommend doing that. It might skew the data a bit. It's better if you just start with the year that you start entering star field data, just so we can get a more accurate rating. Also, we also fine tune our field evaluations year by year. So what happens in one year, we might change a few questions, so it wouldn't really be compatible for the next year's ranking system.
Erin put in the chat area too, and she's really good on this type of stuff, much better than I am. She said there are many more crops on the web app as compared to the PDF field form. So you can still mark other and select practices that are comparable if it fits. And again,
Yep.
I think
Thank
what
you,
David
Aaron.
said too. Yeah,
Yeah.
you can always, I think our field form is still available on the website. So if any of you want to go look at that closer, you feel free to do that. We're closed out as of today, literally, we've closed out this past year's data information and so on. So we're not going to do that for the record, but feel free to contact us if you filled out a field form, want to have some idea of how it would have ranked. We can help you. Just let me know.
All right. Any other questions? Okay. Well, looks like that's everything. Thank you all for coming for today's presentation. We hope it was extremely informative. If you have any other questions or comments that pop up in your head after this call, feel free to email me or Bruce or the info@starfreetool.com. All right. Thank you, guys. Have a wonderful day.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
y'all. See ya.
Thank you so much, Bruce. Thank you so much, David.
Sure. It was good.
Yeah. Well, we
No-
look forward. I might have to connect you. Let's see, with Miss Ginsburg.
Yeah. Got some great ideas. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'll try to make that connection.